Rated mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. Broadcasting from the Big Peach of Atlanta, Georgia. A show unfiltered, unscripted, raw. The Patriot Angle Podcast. Hello guys, welcome to part 2 of Mike Gardner, the early years before podcasting. For those who joined me during part 1 of hearing that, thank you very much. This is going to be part 2. In part 2, guys, I'm going to get into detail of basically where I'm pretty much at currently in podcasting. Part 1, I discussed, my early years, before podcasting, my education, my background, my childhood. This part, I'm going to basically get into, how I started. I want to give credit to some people that helped me out with podcasting, got me into the platform, showed me publishing, showed me editing, showed me the whole kazoo, pretty much, right? So where do I want to start out now? I want to start out with the year 2018. Okay, let's go back to 2018. Now, in 2018, I heard of this concept called podcasting. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is podcasting? All right. Never heard of it before. Well, let me rephrase that. I've heard of the term podcasting, but I just never heard of what it actually is or what the benefits of podcasting are. So I was, kind of confused on how to literally even start a podcast. I don't even think my mindset was there yet, So I began asking friends, work colleagues, and just people that that are kind of personal to me and, close to me on an everyday basis. I'm guys, what's this podcasting stuff? What is it? To be honest with you guys, I thought a podcast was literally it's like a chair or something. You sit on a chair or some kind of you're inside of a cubicle or something. And it kind of regenerates your body. I thought it was similar to getting a massage or something. I mean, yeah, don't laugh, guys. But when you first hear things, you're your mindset races, and you just don't understand it. So then, I began, Googling, podcasting and, how it was developed and when the first podcast was around and, how it, branched out to where it's at now. And I mean, I was doing a lot of researching, guys, about podcasting. This was in February of 2018. Now, mind you, guys, I didn't have any experience with a podcast whatsoever. Didn't even know how to even start with one. But my thoughts were racing very, very rapidly on basically how to start with it because I was getting very interested in it. I was seeing these hosts literally record their episodes, launch them on, platforms such as Spotify, Google, and Apple, and then others, iHeartRadio. And I'm like, man, I want to be one of those hosts, right? I want to get my word out because I feel that if I can get my word out, I think it would be very, very important for people to listen because some of my wording is very unique, very different, set aside from other podcast hosts. I want to be that, that originality, right? Different from the other hosts that are basically broadcasting their own feed. So I'm getting into it, I'm talking to friends. Fast forward, the idea didn't really take off as much as I wanted to back in 2018. It was kind of like a stale moment, right? So fast forward to, let's say, 2019, right? Because I let a whole year go by. Just, it was on my mind, but I wasn't really sure of how to launch this type of product, right? So 2019 comes around, and I'm thinking about podcasting more and more now, right? It's on my mind more and more and more. I'm like, I got to get this launched here. I have an idea of a name. I have some content I'd like to talk about, and I have, pretty much the type of content I'm going to talk about, right? So at first, I was going to go with kind of like a cooking / real world scenario of a podcast, because I was seeing that it was a type of a subject that wasn't being talked about a lot in the podcast world back then in 2019. So I went ahead and I did that. Now, mind you guys, I didn't have any experience whatsoever with podcasting. I found this platform through Spotify called Anchor. And I'm like, wow, this is really unique. You can create podcast episodes, you can record, you can edit out, you can add background music, when you start getting bigger, you can start getting sponsors to get paid and this and that. So I was like, wow, this stuff is really, really cool. So I went ahead and I went along with that idea, and it worked for me. Well, to an extent it did. So I created about 20 episodes, guys. And this is the originality of where the Patriot Angle podcast started from. The original roots of it. Because I can tell you right now, guys, the original name for my podcast wasn't the Patriot Angle podcast. It was actually called the Kitchen Angle. If you look up in our library on Spotify and the other platforms, you will see the original roots to the podcast, which is called the Kitchen Angle. Okay, and mind you, there was about 20 episodes of that original name to the podcast. Okay, we were having fun with it. We were doing, cooking, and we were doing, kind of real world type of stuff, right? It was working. Don't get me wrong. It was working for a while, and I just, as I was getting more and more into the podcast world, so to speak, I was actually thinking of other content that would actually, bring not only more of a personal side to myself to the show, but a passion that I've always had on my mind, which was political views and society at its core. Right? And I was like, you know what? I like to bring that into the show. But what I'm talking about right now wouldn't make any sense, because the content that I'm sharing now doesn't have any relevance to what I would like to bring it in. Right? So I had basically put the podcast on a pause, so to speak, back then. And it was on a long pause. It was about 6 months, right? 6 months, yeah. And I had thought about how I would like to relaunch this podcast show back then. A lot of thoughts were coming to my mind. A lot of views. And I was writing down some ideas. I was kind of channeling them out in my mind, like, how can I relaunch this thing? If I relaunch it, it's got to be bigger than what I first originally said on the show. It's got to be bigger than that. It's got to explode, right? It's like, if this relaunching of the podcast, it's got to have a new name, and it's got to have new content. So I was thinking of names, that was related to my own content that I've been wanting to share for years, that basically says everything about me. So I came up with some ideas, some names. I mean, I could tell you some of the names I was coming up were just like, they were awful. I was like, come on, Mike, you gotta do better than this, So I'm talking to some friends. I'm getting their ideas. I'm getting their suggestions. I'm like, what should I call this new podcast? Because I'm gonna be relaunching it, um, in the in the spring of 2019. I'm gonna relaunch it. I'm gonna make it better and this and that. So, mind you, I finally come up with a name after all these months of just seriously thinking about, how to relaunch this thing. Now, mind you, I'm still an inexperienced podcast host, right? Don't really know too much about it. Sure, I did 20 episodes prior to what I was thinking of how to relaunch the the podcast again. But the 20 episodes weren't that great. I can tell you. You can actually look them back. I actually decided to keep them in the library for certain purposes, right? But I finally, after all those months, because I could tell you right now, I was going into internet cafes such as Starbucks and Books A Million and just all these different internet cafes, at least what I call them, internet cafes, right? I think they have a different name for them now. I think they're just called coffee shops, right? But back then we used to call them internet cafes, right? Because that's what they were designed for. Usually it was like a coffee shop or some kind of bookstore where you can bring your laptop or any one of your devices there to just basically do your research, your schoolwork for college, whatever, right? So basically those internet cafes were basically my little domain, so to speak, of how I was thinking this whole idea through. So one day I was sitting in a Starbucks in Midtown Atlanta. And this is about 2 years ago now, right? And I'm online and I'm thinking of how to create a new logo to bring my new set of content into the show, because I wanted the relaunching to be like bigger than I originally started, right, with the kitchen angle. So I finally come up with a name, the Patriot Angle Podcast. Now this is the original roots of the Patriot Angle Podcast. So it had some scratches, so to speak, to the name. It had some the original image. Wasn't what it is now. The original logo wasn't what it was now. It was a lot different. I went through, I could tell you, with the Patriot Angle Podcast, when it first started out, the first year, guys, I had to go through at least like 3 or 4 logos to where I wanted it now, right? 3 or 4, at least 3 or 4. And I had some help with some friends that were in talk radio. I had a friend that was on the show for a long time, up until recently. His departure from the show, which I will get into later in this episode, which I'm telling you right now, guys, he is very, very sadly missed here on the show. A lot of knowledge, this guy. But like I said, I don't want to skip phases here on the show. I will mention him later in this broadcast, guys. But I got with a couple of friends that had some experience, with podcasting, talk shows, music production, digital graphics, and it was great. I mean, here I am, at the time, and this is 2 years ago, guys. This is I was 37 going on 38 then. So here I am sitting in a Starbucks coffee shop in Midtown Atlanta, trying to figure this stuff out. Trying to figure out if I'm going to literally close down my podcast, walk away from it, and pursue other things. So I'm right about there. Literally, guys, I was actually thinking about just walking away from the whole idea to begin with. I'm like, I'm never going to get to where I want to get, like my following isn't where I want it to be. I'm not reaching a bigger audience. I mean, mind you guys, I was only reaching an audience of, like 400 or 500 people just in the greater Atlanta area. To where it's at now, it's growing, and it still is growing. I mean, I'm now viewed in about 13 countries, which is great. It's awesome. And I'll get to how I got there. Certain tactics, certain techniques, which I do not have a problem sharing here on this, because this episode is actually for other podcast hosts, amateur hosts that are trying to get into the business themselves, developing their own content. Maybe you're a gamer, maybe you're a streamer, maybe you're just an everyday person. Sorry about that, guys. I was getting a phone call here literally as I'm doing this recording, but that's great. See, that's why my podcast episode is unfiltered. So with that being said, guys, like I said, whatever your roots are, guys, this episode will be designed to that amateur podcast host. So back to where I was saying. Where was I saying? See, I got off track here. See, it's okay. Sometimes we do that as human beings. But I'm sitting down at this Starbucks in Midtown Atlanta, right? And I get like this tap on the shoulder from this older gentleman. Looked like he was in his early 60s at that time. And he says, "Hey, man, been kind of looking at what you've been doing for the last 5-10 minutes as I've been waiting in line to get my coffee. I see you're a content creator." I said, "Well, at least I like to think myself as a podcast host." And he kind of smiled and he shrugged his shoulders and he says, "You're not there just yet. What we call in the business, when people get into podcasting, we call them content creators. Until you get to that point, you're just a content creator. You're not a podcast host, because you're creating your content to build it up to become a podcast host." Now, that's something I never heard of. Even in my early searches of podcasting, on Google and just on the internet, I wasn't finding that source of information. I'm like, wow, this guy really seems to know his stuff. So I said, "Do you mind sitting down? Do you have a minute to discuss some things?" And he says, "Well, I'm in a rush. I have to get back to my studio. I'm a music producer." And I said, "Well, do you have a card? You have a name? I can contact you later, and we can discuss this, because I really want to know more of podcasting." So he gave me his card, he gave me his contact information, and later that evening when I got back to my house, I decided to call this guy. His name was Paul. Had a little small production company in Atlanta. Now, while I'm at home, I'm on the phone with this guy, and mind you guys, I don't know this guy personally. Never met him in my life besides the Starbucks coffee shop. Okay? Now, I'm on the phone with this guy, Paul, and I mean, I'm getting information, I'm getting resources, I'm getting all this stuff I've never even heard of, right? And he told me, he says, "When you have a minute, stop by my studio and we'll talk." Now, I decided to take up his offer, and I went over to his studio one day back in 2019, and he showed me things that could benefit my show. He showed me some extra stuff to bring in extra attention to my show, which I was greatly appreciative of. And he showed me different things, different platforms, different types of software to promote the show, different avenues to promote my show. other companies to promote my show, which I've used in the past and still use to this day, which works out great. Now, as I'm learning more and more from Paul, right? I'm learning every day from this guy, and I'm improving, right? I'm improving my content. I'm improving my shows. I see my shows, my numbers go up and up and up since talking to this guy. And mind you, this is just a guy that runs a production company in Atlanta, Georgia, that's just helping somebody out. Didn't ask for money. Just a nice guy, right? And it's surprising because we don't have a lot of people like that in this world, where they will just go out of their way to help somebody. Now, the next couple weeks gets really, really interesting, guys. But before I go there, I want to take a quick break, guys, and I'll be right back after these words. You're not going to want to miss this, because this is where the Patriot Angle podcast really gets its digital brain from. Be right back after these words, guys. Patriot Unfiltered Raw.
Join or add a line for up to 6 lines. You'll stay in control of who can reach your family with spam blocking to stop calls from scammers and the option to only allow trusted contacts to call or text. Sign up today.
All right, guys, back to the show of shows. GoDaddy.com. Check them out today, guys. All right, guys, back to the show here. We're talking about, by the way, guys, for those who's just joining in, you wanted to, kind of skip some of the episode. This is part 2, which is okay. A lot of my listeners do that sometimes, where, some segments interest them, some segments don't interest them. That's okay. Hey, that's unique. That's what makes you, right? Everybody's different. So, guys, this is part 2 of the early years of Mike Gardner before podcasting. Now, this is part 2 of where I currently am now. How I got into podcasting up to currently where I am now. I had to fix that there. Anyway, guys, so as I'm talking with this gentleman, Paul, right, he's helping me out with my podcasting content. He's helping me out with all this stuff. Now, a couple weeks go by, and I'm really, really getting the hang of it, right? I'm getting my voice comfortable with speaking. I'm getting a hang of these segments. I'm getting, I'm understanding, what to plug in, what not to plug in. The sound effects, the sound clips, I'm really getting a hang of that. He's shown me a lot. Now, he tells me, I'd like to have my son help you out even more because it would be easier for him to help you out because I get really, really busy here in the studio. Which I was like, that's cool. All right, awesome. Bring him on. So his son, Josh, comes along, right? And Josh really becomes like the side piece, right? The background, so to speak, of the show, right? I've had him on the show a couple times as sound effects and stuff like that, sound pieces, but really as a background of the show, right? Which some of my episodes were broadcasted and recorded just in Paul's studio, which is also Josh's studio too. Then it was. I'll get into where Josh and his family currently are later in the episode. But, a lot of my episodes were recorded in that studio, which was the original studio of the Patriot Angle podcast. Now I have my own studio, which I use as a spare bedroom in my own leisure of my private home, which I've set up very, very nicely. I've had a couple of video shows, video podcast shows through our good friends at StreamYard, which we really appreciate using their service to produce our video podcasting. And yeah, I can't appreciate them more. But where Josh was really a basically a side piece to this show. Really appreciated of having him on my show. He was basically like I said, the side piece of the show. Plugged in a lot of my sound effects, plugged in a lot of my sound clips, stuff that I didn't really know about or even had the experience of how to do that. Josh really showed me a lot. Just in the last, I'd say about 8 to 9 months, almost a year now, of him being on the show. But sadly, guys, as of a month ago, almost a month and a half ago now, Josh hasn't been on the show. We had lost Josh here on the show, basically departed to his own avenues, his own passions in life, so to speak. And Josh and his family had moved down to Central Florida, over to the Tampa Bay area of Florida. Left his dad's studio and decided to pursue in his own passion and open up his own production studio. So that's where Josh is right now, down in Tampa, Florida. I did promise Josh that I would not plug in any of his stuff without his permission. So, when he gets his studio set up, he's still in the production, so to speak, of setting it up. He's been over there for about a month and a half. I'm told this stuff it takes time. So he's not fully opened up yet in Florida. But when he opens up, I will plug in some information if he allows it to be aired on the show here. I always ask people for their permission. I never plug in anything without their permission. Okay? Content is another story. That's a free avenue, so to speak, guys. But yeah. We've had lost Josh about a month and a half ago on the show, but don't worry, guys. Him and I we're still buddies, right? He's still my friend. I consider him a good friend, even though he's about 10 years, almost 11 years younger than me. He's a young kid with a lot of knowledge. I can tell you that right now. He's got a lot of knowledge. He's got a lot of smarts, a lot of intelligence with the business, production, and digital arts, and gifts. I didn't know what the hell a gift was until about a few years ago. Actually not Josh, but somebody else explained to me what a gift was. I was like, what the hell is a gift? I get a gift, you give it to somebody or something? And they're like, no, it's like an internet thing where you can use as an overlay. Hell, I didn't even know what overlays were until Josh told me what an overlay was and the benefits of them when you use them in video podcasting. I was like, whoa. Which, is awesome because I use the overlays and the GIFs all the time when promoting my episodes. So, like I said, guys, this episode is going to be probably the most personal episode you will hear, set aside from part one. Part one, I got a little personal with my early life of the education, how I was brought up by my parents and family members and this and that. But, now I really want to give credit to where it's due. I want to give credit to where credit is due. I want to give credit to Josh. Thank you, buddy, for helping me out with this podcast over the last course of almost a year. Thank you, Paul, for helping me out in the early runs of the podcast. I really appreciate that. I know they do listen on a daily basis when my podcast episodes get launched on any one of those apps, whether it's Spotify, Google, or Apple. So thank you. I really want to give appreciation. Now, this part right here of the podcast, guys, is nothing but credit and appreciation. I want to give the credit and appreciation to where it's due. Okay, I want to give a credit to my good friend, okay, which I consider him a friend now. Okay, I've gotten to know him for almost a year now, just about a year. I want to say back in March, maybe, we started talking, and didn't really have him on my show until like the course of about the summertime, which is okay. You know, I like to get to know people first before I bring them on the show, you know, on a personal level. But I wanted to give thanks to my really good friend here on the podcast, right? I've had him on my podcast about 2 or 3 times. PJ of Archangel Protective Intelligence. So thank you, PJ. I want to give credit to you and appreciation to you for showing me different things that will benefit my show, which you're probably questioning yourself if you do, or if you are listening to this show. You're like, what the hell is Mike crediting me for? I'm crediting you because there are certain things that you had showed me that you might not understand or might not realize. So thank you, PJ of Archangel Protective Intelligence. Guys, if you want to follow PJ, you can follow him on Instagram, Archangel Protective Intelligence. Archangel Protective Intelligence. He's on Instagram, guys. Really, really swell guy. I'm going to have him on my show again in the future. Just don't know when. But it's always a privilege and an honor to have him on my show. Also would like to thank, who else should I thank? Oh, my cousin. Yes, my cousin Derek out of Dallas, Texas. He is a Twitch streamer. He has his own gaming channel on Twitch, which you could follow him and see all his videos. He's a swell guy. He knows his stuff in the gaming industry, I can tell you that. And he's a damn good streamer, guys. Damn good streamer. Very unique streamer and very different from other streamers I've noticed in the past and in the present. You could follow him at LizDexia82. That's LizDexia82. Follow my good cousin there, Derek, out of Dallas, Texas, guys. He basically streams about, 3-4 times a week, if I'm correct. I know his schedule had changed a little bit. But, yeah, if you follow him on Twitch, you can get his schedule. You can get everything about him. Like I said, he's an awesome streamer on Twitch. And really, really well known. Well over 1,000 followers. So much appreciation to my cousin Derek. Also would like to give thanks to U.S. freedom fighters. They've become our friends here on the podcast, U.S. freedom fighters. Thank you very much, guys. I know you. I've had you on my show a couple times. Thank you, Jerry, which I will have him on my show during the Christmas week. Going to have him on my show on the 23rd. So looking forward to having Jerry of U.S. Freedom Fighters back on the show, which you could follow them. They have a couple of avenues to follow them. They are on Facebook. They have 2 Facebook group pages. U.S. Freedom Fighters is their one group page, and also they have another group page, which is U.S. Freedom Fighters Survival page. So, yeah, follow them right there. They have a lot of following, and it's growing by the minute, guys, which we do appreciate them for allowing us to pretty much post and share a lot of our content on their U.S. Freedom Fighters Facebook page. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everyone there at U.S. Freedom Fighters. Also, you can check them out on usfreedomfighters.com. And get all their content right there. They're a good set of guys. Also, too, I would like to thank 420 VIPs. I've had them on my show a couple of times, more than a couple times. I think I'm like 4 or 5 times now. Whether it's Rob or whether it's Tom, or both of them at the same time. You can catch my episodes, a couple video episodes I've had on with them, and the majority is a lot of audio podcasting. I had them on quite recently during Thanksgiving. which is another set of guys. Always a privilege and an honor to have them on my show. Such an honor. Gonna have them on again. Don't know when, but they will be on a future date. So look out for that again. Always a good set of guys. They're very humorous. They're very comical. Every time I have them on my show, it's a very unique, different type of show. We do get into political viewpoints, but very, very, very comical. You can follow them on Facebook, whether it's 420 VIPs, their group page, their website, 420vips.com. I mean, they have a lot of 420 VIP type of stuff. They're basically branching into a lot of different type of content. I'm told now, what the last podcast I had them on, basically Tom, which is the founder of 420 VIPs, had told me that they have a date group now. Yes, which I think is a first, guys. I don't think that there is an actual another competitor of theirs with the 420 date group scenario. So yes, you can Google search 420 VIPs date or dating. I think it's dating. Don't quote me on that. I will correct that in the show notes here on the show. Which I will have other show notes with the other plugins that I plugged in, whether it's U.S. Freedom Fighters or Archangel Protective Intelligence. I will have it in my show notes so you can follow them. They're a really, really set of swell people. Like they have a really, because their content, guys, is different from everything else that I have on my show. That's what makes the Patriot Angle podcast unique. That's where it's at now, guys, and this is where I'm going to go with it in closing. Basically, our podcast is designed for political viewpoints and talking points and opinions and whatever you would like to bring on the show. But I do, from time to time, like to talk about other things. Hence the word Patriot Angle. It's all about our Patriot angle of viewpoints. That's how I basically wanted to set up my show. And that's how it's going to continue. So with that being said, guys, I want to close it out here, but I want to say thank you for literally listening to part 1 of this and also now part 2. This is going to be the final part of Mike Gardner, the early years before podcasting. Was going to do a third part, but I think I pretty much got into it with everything on part 2 here. Got into my credits here of how I want to credit some people here that got me to where I would like to be in the podcasting world. And guys, like I said, this show is not over. It's constantly growing. And I think every podcast show out there is always constantly growing. I don't think that they're always at their peak yet. They're constantly growing. They're constantly developing. They're constantly adding new content, new graphics, new segments, new everything, guys. That's what makes a podcast different from a regular, your old school terrestrial radio of a talk show. They're constantly growing, guys. Podcasting is the new talk show of the millennium. And where it goes is on me. The wonders of podcasting. I can't wait for the next adventure of where they bring podcasting at in the 2020s and beyond. With that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. Remember, follow me on Spotify. You will not get up-to-date episode launchings unless you follow me on Spotify, Google, or Apple. Follow me on those platforms and you will get up-to-date episode launchings. Remember, guys, if you'd like to support our podcast, you can support our podcast by going to anchor.fm/The Patriot Angle Podcast. Appreciation is always accepted. Donations, never accepted, but greatly appreciated. It helps out our show, and it helps out bring in new equipment to the show, and it helps out with new segments. Segments are always important here on the show. It helps that out tremendously. You can follow me on Facebook, the Patriot Angle Podcast, as well as Instagram. You can also follow me on my website. Yes, we do have an official website, patriotanglepodcast.com. Again, it's patriotanglepodcast.com. Or if you'd like to support our show even more, you can go over to our official merchandise website, which is patriotunfiltered.com. A lot of unfiltered merchandise. We like to use the word unfiltered because that's basically what we are going through in times today of our society. We are being shadow banned. We are being censored. So, guys, if you want to stand up against the tyranny, the tyrants of Washington, and the tyrants of big tech and other monopolies, head over to patriotunfiltered.com. Get yourself a Patriot Angle Podcast t-shirt, whether it's a mug. There's a lot of different things. Hoodies on there. I have women's yoga pants. I have just about everything on that website. Enter the promo code UNMASK for free shipping. That's right, guys. Those promo codes will go away soon. But I will promise that we will try to get more promo codes on that website after the new year. Again, guys, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on Tuesday evening for a brand new episode of the Patriot Angle Podcast with a new guest that never been on the show before. You're going to want to tune that in, guys. Like I said, this will be the last episode up until this Tuesday. I'm going to take off a couple days, relax, and focus on my other line of work. But tune us in on Tuesday, as we will have another episode with a brand new guest. You're going to want to check that out, guys. It's going to be a really, really, really good episode. I can tell you right now. I'm talking with this individual. He's very knowledgeable, and he knows his stuff, guys. With that being said, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Patriot Unfiltered Raw. You just heard an episode of the Patriot Angle Podcast, an Anchor platform.